Welcome to the Deep Dive. You sent us some really interesting material, and today we're going to zero in on those key insights.
Yeah, get you up to speed quickly.
Exactly. Think of it like your personal summary of some complex ideas so you feel informed, ready to, engage with it.
And today, that material is Guy Lakeman's Look Back in Awe, Not Anger. It's quite a piece, looks at historical cycles, societal change.
And brings in machine intelligence in a pretty fascinating way.
Absolutely. So you can expect ideas about historical parallels, how technology shifts things, and this sort of forward look at AI or machine intelligence.
Right. Our mission here is really to unpack Lakeman's view on these patterns, these cycles of progress and disruption.
And then see how the current rise of machine intelligence fits into that historical framework he lays out.
Okay, so where do we start? Lakeman seems to kick things off with a pretty fundamental point about change itself.
He does. His core argument right at the beginning is that evolution, whether it's natural or, human-driven technology, it's basically an unstoppable force.
He has that analogy, doesn't he?
Yeah.
About humans being like
Duct tape repairers.
yeah, trying to patch a leaky roof during a massive storm.
Exactly. It really highlights how little long-term control we actually have over these really big fundamental forces.
It's a strong image.
And to really drive that home, he points to these massive shifts in Earth's history. Like the very first life emerging from the primordial soup, that was a radical change.
Totally different planet afterwards.
Or the oxygen crisis early on. Oxygen was toxic to the life that existed then.
Right, but it paved the way for completely new life forms.
Precisely. And then the classic example, the asteroid that wiped out the dinosaurs. Changed everything.
So these aren't just small bumps. These are transformative events.
And Lakeman's point through all this is that adaptation, not trying to control the uncontrollable, that's what's key for survival when these big shifts happen.
Okay, so that's the big picture on change. Then he seems to pivot more towards human history and its own patterns.
Yeah, he talks about these cycles, periods of growth, intellectual expansion, followed by times of, stagnation or even going backwards.
He mentions the boom after agriculture was adopted.
A huge acceleration. You get mathematics, science, technology, the foundations of civilization really taking off, an incredible period of intellectual discovery.
But then he talks about this down cycle.
He calls it a period of global lunacy, starting around 500 CE, specifically in Europe, what we often call the Dark Ages.
Right.
His argument is that rational progress pretty much ground to a halt there. Why? Because of massive social and, importantly, emotional upheaval.
So the takeaway is that how society feels can actually stop intellectual progress in its tracks.
That seems to be his argument. It's a bit sobering, like you said. Progress isn't guaranteed.
But he does make a point that it wasn't a total standstill everywhere, right?
Oh, absolutely. He's careful to note that, mathematical development, for instance, continued in places like India and the Far East during that same period.
Okay, so it was more of a European phenomenon, this particular dip.
In his analysis, yes. And that sets the stage for the next big shift, the return of reason.
The Reformation, the Enlightenment.
Exactly. He points to figures like Descartes, the huge emphasis back on the scientific method, the whole idea of saper aude.
Dare to know.
Dare to know. Using evidence, logical deduction.
Yeah.
A fundamental shift back towards valuing reason.
And Descartes' discourse on the method, what was it, 1637?
Yeah.
That focus on doubting everything systematically, that was huge.
A real cornerstone, absolutely. But then, and this is where Lakeman's argument gets, I think, particularly interesting. He introduces the counter movement.
Romanticism.
Yes. And his take on Romanticism is, quite critical. He sees it as a direct backlash against the Enlightenment's focus on pure reason.
So prioritizing emotion, imagination,
Yeah.
intuition.
All of that. Over reason. He actually calls it an artistic bandit attack of emotional deception.
Wow, bandit attack. He doesn't mince words.
Not at all. His core idea is that this swing towards valuing feeling above reason actually undermined rational progress again.
So it wasn't just a different focus, it was actively detrimental in his view.
That's the argument. He suggests this romanticizing of the past, especially the Middle Ages, and the focus on intense feeling diverted energy from rational thought.
And he connects this emotional focus to real-world problems.
Directly. He draws a line from this kind of prioritization of emotion straight to major societal disruptions, even wars.
So the idea is that when collective emotion overrides reason, things can go badly wrong.
That's the crux of it. He suggests these periods dominated by intense emotion, even if maybe shorter than the rational periods, they're the ones leading to the biggest instability.
Yeah.
He sees a link from Romanticism right through to the world wars and even connects it to some contemporary issues, things he describes as nonsense, childish, emotional dysfunction, sensationalist media, maybe?
So basically, unchecked emotion as a potentially destructive societal force.
That's his perspective, and this whole analysis is back and forth between reason and emotion leads him to his next big point. The idea that we are now entering, or maybe are already in, a new machine intelligent renaissance.
Ah, okay. So after these cycles, after the recent challenges he hints at, machine intelligence is the next big positive shift.
That's how he frames it. And he contrasts this potential with what he sees as the failures of, quote, existing human group intelligence to solve current major problems.
He's not optimistic about our current collective abilities then.
Seems not. He views sophisticated machine intelligence as offering a potential way out, a turning point.
And he mentions a conflict brewing, right, between embracing this new intelligence and something else.
Yeah, he highlights this tension. On one side, those embracing machine intelligence. On the other, those trying to counter it perhaps with appeals to emotional intelligence.
Interesting distinction.
And Lakeman's position is pretty clear. He believes reason and science, potentially amplified by machines, are coming back to the forefront. That's the direction he sees as positive.
Okay, and he makes a further distinction within machine intelligence itself. Something about ownership.
He does. This is quite thought-provoking. He contrasts open-owned machine intelligence, which he kind of associates with the East.
Meaning more publicly accessible, maybe?
Yeah, perhaps less centrally controlled, more distributed, versus billionaire-owned private systems, which he pins more on the West.
And he has a prediction about which will prevail.
He predicts the open-owned model will likely win out. Why? Because of its inherent diversity.
Ah, linking back to the evolutionary idea, diversity fosters adaptation.
Exactly. He sees that diversity as the crucial engine for innovation and adaptation, mirroring those natural evolutionary forces he talked about earlier. More diverse inputs, more robust outcomes.
So looking forward then, what's the potential impact Lakeman sees from this machine intelligent renaissance? Is he generally positive?
Overall, yes, I'd say optimistic. He talks about expecting a leap in productive society.
Okay.
And potentially a world that operates more on reason, less swayed by emotional volatility. Well, the core idea seems to be that machines, unlike us perhaps, can actually learn from the massive data set of human history. All our mistakes, all our cycles.
So they might help us avoid repeating those emotionally driven errors.
That seems to be the hope, that machine intelligence could help analyze situations more rationally.
But there's a warning too, isn't there? A note of caution.
Definitely. He specifically says to beware the romantic emotional fools.
Right, the ones who might stir up conflict based on feeling rather than facts or logic.
Precisely. The core message there is, stay vigilant. Don't let emotionally charged narratives derail what he sees as potential rational progress.
So the potential is there for assisted intelligence to help society make more stable, informed choices.
That's the potential he outlines. Resisting emotional manipulation, choosing what he calls common sense over
the emotional banditry.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The potential, as he frames it, is for a more cohesive, maybe even more peaceful society if guided more by reason, aided by machines.
Okay, so let's just quickly recap this deep dive into Lakeman's look back in awe, not anger. We've touched on the inevitability of change.
Those big evolutionary shifts.
The cyclical nature of human history, this constant tension, this back and forth between reason and emotion.
Yeah, the Dark Ages versus the Enlightenment, Romanticism.
And now the potential for machine intelligence to be the next major evolutionary step. A step Lakeman seems to hope could push us towards a more rational future.
And throughout it all, that title phrase, looking back with awe, not anger, trying to understand these huge forces with respect for their power rather than reacting with fear or negativity to the changes they bring.
Which really leaves us with a final thought, something for you, the listener, to mull over. In a world where machine intelligence is becoming more and more influential, how do you personally cultivate your own critical thinking? How do you practice discerning reason from emotion in the flood of information you encounter every day?
Yeah, that's the challenge.
What's your role, your position in navigating this evolving relationship between human feelings, human intuition, and the growing power of artificial reason in our society? It's a landscape that's shifting fast.
And figuring out where you stand, how you engage with it, that seems pretty crucial going forward.